You're listening to another episode of the Anna Vivo podcast. Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Anna Vivo podcast. I'm your host, Tim C. Miller, co-hosted with none other than Sizzly Steve.
What it do?
And we are joined today in the studios by an atmosphere and brotherhood of love as we come before you to share something that is near and dear to Steven's heart. And talk about that today. So what I want to kick us off with is, if you are driving while you are listening to this, if you are working while you are listening to this, or if you are doing something else, I would like to know, our listeners would like to know, what activity you find yourself doing while listening to this particular podcast. And it will be relevant in a future podcast episode to come. But if you are listening to this on Apple iTunes or Spotify or Pandora or wherever you listen to this at, there theoretically should be a poll option at the bottom of this episode. If not, head to annavivo.com, just the main website, annavivo.com, and you will see the episode embedded in a neutral player right on the website there, and you can click on the poll there as well. So there should be a poll option with some generic things like I'm working, I'm driving, I'm cleaning, I'm doing nothing, or other. So you'll see a list of things for you to choose from, and it would be interesting for a future episode if you could participate. So go head over there to annavivo.com, check out that poll or on your episode there. And without further ado, topic for today.
Bureaucratic inertia.
Bureaucratic inertia. That sounds like a cleverly adapted title for this episode that we can use for the poll that I just announced.
There we go. Yeah, so it's all about the government gives you a certain budget for the year.
Okay.
And as long as you spend it and say you need the same amount or more, you keep getting that, or you get more.
Right. Never down.
Never down. But as soon as you say, "Oh, we didn't use it all," boom, you're done.
I did a good thing. I saved some for you. You're
no longer funded.
Yeah. Okay.
And your whole program shut down.
So the inertia, the bureaucratic inertia, moving forward. Okay.
Yes. So there are, a very famous example is this COVID. We are still getting COVID funds.
Interesting.
Year after
Isn't
year.
it 2024?
And it's getting bigger. And we have more COVID funds for each state, for Washington at least, than we did when COVID was active.
Weird.
Isn't that weird? Why? Because of bureaucratic inertia.
That's a good segue into what Texas is doing with the immigrants, where they're shipping the immigrants on buses to Chicago, and then Chicago is using COVID funds, $75 million of COVID funds to come and pick them up and rehouse them or move them around or put them, get them into the system. But they're using COVID funds.
Isn't that crazy? They're like, we're a sanctuary city. We would gladly take them, Texas.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden when
it
Texas
actually happens,
says, yeah, okay, we'll send them to you. It's like, no, we're banning all buses.
Weird. Anyway, so what are your thoughts on this? Did you have an agenda with this topic?
I don't have an agenda with this topic, but my thoughts are, when does it stop?
Where does it stop?
Where does it end?
Yeah.
Why are we allowing this to happen, and who's funding all this?
You are, my friend.
Well, no, because
Yes.
because the U.S. taxpayers are not even able to keep up with our current spending.
That's
So,
why they increase every year.
right. I mean, so it's not me funding it because we're way beyond that point. We're in so much debt and we're getting into more and more debt every year.
Mhm.
And if this bureaucratic inertia increases, then
At some point,
there's
somebody's going
the
to come
U.S.
collecting.
taxpayer is not able to fund anything that the United States does at its current level.
Right.
And so where are we getting the money
What a
to
great
say,
case argument for increasing taxes. We
Yeah.
can't keep up with it. Oh, you're right. We should increase those.
where can we get off by saying, let's keep increasing the funding that we're spending on everything anyways? I think it's only because we have a printing press.
Well, that's the sort of joke reason, but I would challenge you to pull up a separate tab there and Google who the largest holder of debt is, U.S. debt.
I think I already know it's China, right?
Well, pull it up.
Okay, all right. Who is the largest holder of U.S. debt?
So this entity is purchasing all of our debt, and so
Interesting.
to your question, when our taxes are limited, thankfully, but even still they go up. But you're right. There's so much extra spending that happens from somewhere. It's got to be borrowed from somewhere or someone. Who is it?
Japan. You weren't expecting that either, were you?
No. So there's an interesting dynamic happening. There should actually be a breakdown on that. If you click on, are you just looking at the main page? I can't see your screen.
It's China and Japan are the top two. It's China.
Yeah.
However, as of January of last year, it's Japan. So I don't know how up to date all this information is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So
who do you think it is?
Well, no, I was going to say China also, which is usually always number one.
Yeah.
But if you click on that link, there should be a breakdown on the percentages of what that looks like, because it's not like they're buying up 100%. So they're splitting it. In this case, it sounds 50-50 from what you're reading. But
yeah, Japan has, as of January of last year, 1.08 trillion, and China is at 870 billion.
Right, and then a myriad of other
United Kingdom, Belgium,
countries,
Luxembourg, Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Ireland, Canada, Brazil.
Yeah, so if we follow the money trail here, one of my interests in my master's degree that I wanted was forensic accounting. And one of the exciting things in that field of study is obviously following the money and seeing when we're looking at economic policies and why are we allowing Huawei 5G infrastructure towers to be built off the coast of the U.S. in the Mexican waters, but right off the coast of the U.S. to collect on us. Why are we allowing that? Well, it's not because we don't like it. If you just asked someone their opinion on another country spying on American people, obviously they're going to say, oh, I don't like it. Well, if you look at who the debt holder is, it doesn't matter what you like, because if we have so much debt beholden to the UK, who is outside of China, the number one consumer of Huawei 5G technology, then we have to, if we want to play ball with them, if we want to consider ourselves, quote, allies and friends and have favorable economic policy, we've got to play ball financially. And because they own the interest, the financial interest of the United States and its people, we play ball with them, the UK or China.
They already have their
or
towers
Japan.
all over Canada.
Right. And so there's so it's interesting to your point. Where is all this money coming from? We've created this, right? We're a capitalist machine where we've incentivized corporations or government entities. Think of the DoD as a good example of coming back every year with a Department of Defense budget and saying, yep, we did spend that $1 billion. Sure enough, obviously it's more than that, but we spent that $1 billion and we'll need it again and or more.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, well, our taxes only cover a portion of that. And China and Japan and the UK and everybody else is like, great. Yeah, well, of course we'll cover that for you. And you'll owe us X, Y, and Z, or we'll come collecting. And
to a point, though, I don't even think they're paying for it at a certain point because
Well, that list, if you click on it, there's hundreds of people and even companies on that list, not countries. So
right.
it does cover it, but it's not all China or all Japan.
But I don't think. I mean, we're so in debt to people. I don't think it's. I think we're just printing money.
No, but that's where you're wrong. We can't just legally, illegal. You can't just print off paper and say it's good.
Says who?
You have to have that exchange. Now, hold on.
You just
hold on a second.
dilute it.
No, hold on a second. There's an economy that we believe in. There's a term for this that's escaping my mind right now. But basically where I'm going to print off $1 billion and Japan, China, UK is going to buy $1 billion worth of my debt and fund that for me. So essentially we have that. Then there's another economy. It's not called a shadow economy. And it's not as evil or notorious as that word sounds, but it is essentially where we have all of this unattached money, unbacked printed money that does exist, that does dilute the economy. And a good example of that is simply the counterfeiting process. And how many, you could go on the Department of Homeland Security's website or ask Nate how much money in counterfeit dollars the U.S. has confiscated just in 2023. And so, another pro tip here, China is the number one producer of counterfeit U.S. dollars, go figure, and floods our economy to dilute the value of that U.S.-backed dollar that is purchased by the debt that is held by these other countries or corporations. So you're right that you can technically print money and it's counterfeit, but I'm talking about just the main economy here. It's debt that is purchased by other countries.
So when we had our COVID fiasco and the government said everyone's getting $1,000,
right,
and they just printed $2.4 trillion,
somebody bought that. Right, or multiple somebodies.
There must have been multiple because no one owns more than $1 trillion of our debt.
Well, right, not by themselves.
Right.
Would you say Japan was at
$1 billion? It must have been
Japan's
at $1 trillion.
At $1 trillion, yeah.
China's almost at $1 trillion. So it must have been like a bunch of people got together and said, I know we're struggling, but hey, we'll bolster your economy? Like, what? Does that make sense?
Well, there's trade-offs, right? I mean, this we could go on for years, but there's trade-offs where we're providing tax incentives for I pick on China a lot, but I don't mean to, but they are one of the largest producers of our goods. But we tax them, right? For every good that they bring into a U.S. port, we tax them on their goods that they're bringing in. So there's trade-offs where we say, hey, we'll lower your tariff on these goods if you purchase X amount of debt, or if you back us in this play, or if you do this and that. And that's why it's never as clean as people think. They're like, why are we not protecting Taiwan? They are about to lose their sovereignty to China. Why don't we just go over there and do something? Why are we not protecting Ukraine? Why are we not protecting Israel? Why are we not getting involved in here or saying no to this or being involved in this? It's never as black and white as it seems because we have so many other interests, political, financial, economical, that require us all to be in play and be balanced. And when they're not balanced, that's when we look at the economy and we can stand back from an analytical standpoint and say, that's why this is happening, or this is about to fall, or this is going to go down. And so it's really like a 3D, 4D, 10D chessboard with all of these other labeled pieces, which is kind of cool to look at and kind of neat to analyze, but yeah, a lot to track. So
it is interesting that you talk about how China's like the number one counterfeiter of U.S. dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I did watch. What was I watching? I was watching. I think it was Reacher on Amazon Prime.
Oh,
and they're
it's a good book.
Discovering this counterfeiter, and everybody in South America is using counterfeit money because when you're down there, who's going to say this isn't a real U.S. dollar?
Right. I'll take it.
Yeah. You'll take it. I'll take it. And so it's like the number one use case of counterfeit money is just outside of America.
Right.
But back in history, Abraham Lincoln authorized, when they were in debt, had no more money, he authorized the printing of greenbacks.
Yeah.
Not backed by physical gold or silver.
Right.
Because they're in debt. And so he just printed money to get money.
Right. That was one of the first cases where we broke away from the gold standard and we no longer had a asset-based currency. So our currency became there's a word
Fake.
for it. Fiat, is that the word?
Yeah,
It's
fake.
It's basically an untethered currency that, as long as we believe
Form
in
of
it,
fiat currency, not backed by physical gold.
yeah, fiat currency. So as long as we believe in it, it's real, right? That's basically what we all do. If you agree it's real, like you said in South America, if you agree to take it and you give me a good for it, hey, we're all good, right? And so, in times of war or things like that, especially at that time, the country's divided. But even then, after he printed it, it didn't just go into the economy and disappear, right? It went into your pocket as a citizen.
Well,
or
it
this person's
diluted
pocket
the
as a
heck
citizen.
out of it.
Right, but somebody then bought up that because it was considered a debt. At that point, it became a debt. It was no longer tied to an asset. It was owed. So meaning if you look on the dollar bill, it says this is a tendered note or something like that you can exchange for currency. And at a certain point, it no longer said that on the U.S. dollar. And so when it became that, it became a note, which is a debt. It became a note. I'm giving you this piece of paper that promises that you have a dollar sitting in your bank. And so once that debt became real and realized, then corporations, countries, people began to buy all that up and they became the asset essentially instead of gold.
So basically, if the U.S. government were to just print another $8 trillion of greenbacks,
Right.
Japan and China and everybody else would be the holders of all that because they just eat it. They would eat all that cost.
Well,
they
wouldn't eat it. They would take it.
All the debt we currently have.
Yeah.
No, even if they weren't willing to buy it, they would. All the current debt they currently have would just be diluted so bad to the point where they are now paying for our debt, regardless if they agree to or not, because the money that we owe them is now so diluted.
No,
we could print money and pay their debt.
And pay their debt?
Yeah, we owe them $1 trillion.
If somebody else...
We could print $1 trillion and just hand it over to them.
If somebody else agreed to hold that, back us for that.
No, because in the Civil War we did it. No one agreed to anything. We just printed the money.
Right, but we didn't trade it for debt.
Right. So we could just print the money now.
What you're saying is if we printed money and gave it to China to pay off our loan, that would work. But then China's holding pieces of paper that's not backed by somebody. So as long as it's backed by somebody, then it's good. They're not going to just, obviously, you wouldn't take
It's not backed by anybody. It's backed by the...
Not exactly.
I think it's real money, and you think it's real money.
But they don't think that's the problem. It's not actually backed by somebody. It's like printing monopoly
You don't
money.
think you could take a $100 bill around the world and say, this is $100?
No, again, to the point of counterfeiting, that does happen. You know, there's some great, if anybody's interested and wants to go down rabbit trails, look at the CIA fund money that they use all the time, where it's a narcotics trade essentially for cash and allows them to operate outside of their operating budget, their government issued operating budget, because of this untracked money essentially. So certainly counterfeiting happens and even has its place. But to your point of, hey, we owe Japan $1 trillion, we're going to print off paper and hand it to them. Obviously, Japan's not going to. Both parties have to agree that it's real. And if Japan doesn't agree that it's real, then it's not a trade. We can't just pay it off. So it would have to be purchased or owned by another country or another corporation, or, you know, backed by somebody that says, yeah, we're good for that. We are good for that. And so, a very easy way to describe it is the five of us as kids sitting in a circle. And anytime you want a piece of candy from the candy jar, it costs a toy, and I say, yeah, I'll pay that toy for Steven, and Steven can keep grabbing candy from that bag. But as soon as I stop paying that, you don't get more candy. So what has to happen is I have to then continue to manufacture toys, or get toys from someone else to pay, or get them from Ben or Seth, and continue to back that process. And so that's why, going back to the 5D chess, 10D chess, we'll trade our debt for lower taxes from the same person that's buying our debt. China will say, I'll buy this $1 trillion or this, $500 billion in exchange for you granting me a monopoly, essentially, on manufactured goods in the United States. How many McDonald's toys have you ever seen that say made in Korea or made in Japan? Most of them say, all of them. I've never seen one that doesn't say made in China.
Yeah.
And so they have, there's monopolies that they have with different companies or just the U.S. At large for better tariffs or better economic policies or better maritime policies. I mean, this extends all the way into our warfighting domain in terms of how and where we operate within their borders or what we recognize. How many Hollywood movies have you seen recently that allow maps in their movies that say the 9-dash line is a real thing that we're acknowledging? And the 9-dash line is something that we've never formally acknowledged as a United States, but our culture will acknowledge because it's the cost of doing business. We will, to get our movies into China, we will play by their economic rules and say, yeah, sure, you own the Philippines and all of the waters around them and blah, blah, blah. And we'll agree to that because we want to sell our Hollywood movies there and make a lot of money. So there's trades that happen, at all different levels, and it can get so convoluted. But to my heart's cause, it's the cost of sin is what happens. We put humans in it, and we get greedy. I've said it before, money talks, everything else walks, and we chase that rabbit, and we go as far as we can. So nobody creates jobs. They just create more complicated things that require more things. So the IRS tax code could be one pamphlet, but because we need to create more jobs and make that look like a good optic or PR case, we turn the IRS code into how many volumes of tax law now so that we can create more jobs for people and require it to be so administratively burdensome that the normal American citizen can't even pay their own taxes for free. And so we have all of these third parties like TurboTax who are under lawsuit, or H&R Block or whomever doing that we as a citizen have to pay for to then pay our taxes. So think about that. Hey, you owe me money just for existing. And by the way, you're going to pay this company to help you pay me this money because I've made it too convoluted for you to do.
Consultant is required to offer a free form of their
That's why
services.
TurboTax is in lawsuit, because they are. You're right. And they've made it so impossible to do that people don't.
So, so to full circle it.
Yeah.
If you were a government agency, your death sentence would be to say,
your financial
we
death
didn't
sentence.
use all the money.
Right. As a nuclear family, as a family unit, my role is to save and be fiscally conservative and to do a better job of budgeting and have a surplus of funds every year. But
exactly, yeah. Your 401k, your vacation fund.
To operate within my budget, to always have an extra at the end. Look, I did a great job. I've got extra money. But in a government entity, my job is to blow it all as much as possible.
Yeah, blow it all, spend it all, and go over budget.
Did I share this story on an episode already about when I was ordering rubber O-rings for my JP5 fuel pumps on the USS George Washington and the cost of those O-rings?
I'm going to be completely honest. I haven't heard every podcast.
You were with me. You co-host these podcasts.
Then I haven't heard that story.
Okay.
So I was going to say, I haven't heard every podcast because you've had some other guests on.
From my own brother.
You haven't talked about that with me.
Okay. Well, if you've heard this, listener, I apologize in advance. But to the point of this episode, we were out in the Indian Ocean and two of our fuel pumps blew rubber gaskets. And so we had to order new gaskets for our fuel pumps. And we pulled back in to Japan. This was right before the big earthquake in 2011. And we went into a period of essentially a dry dock period, but we weren't actually dry dock because we're the 4 deployed carriers. So we just had a lot of things open, our fuel pumps open and everything, and our voids and everything to be cleaned and do all this stuff before we went back out to sea. So anyway, I went into town to grab O-rings for our pumps because they were needed yesterday. And if you've been in the Navy, the officer says, "Hey, this needs to be up and running." The expectation is it's up and running. Chief, make it happen. And the chief says, "Miller, this was due yesterday. Let's get this happening." And so we just do whatever we can to get these things running, which is not by the books at all, right? And but in the same vein, if we push back and say, actually, we can't until this O-ring comes, then it gets even worse. So anyway, to the point, I'm in the Daiso, which is a dollar store at the in Japan, essentially a really awesome dollar store. We have Daisos here in the U.S. now. We just opened a new one in Burlington, actually, which is funny.
Are you talking about dollar stores?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Japanese dollar
stores. What do you mean
stores.
now? Oh, Japanese dollar
Yeah.
stores. I was going to say, we've had dollar stores.
No, the Daiso. Anyway, they're really fancy, really cool dollar stores. And so I'm in, so you can get things like O-rings and whatever. And so I'm looking for them, and I went to they've got a little hardware store next door. It came out to something like 14 cents an O-ring. So it was like a bag of 5 or 10 or whatever. And so it was a few bucks that I could get these O-rings that I needed. And I brought them back, and I was going down, I'm an E5 at the time. I'm going down to install these O-rings, and
they were too cheap.
No, they're just fine. They look exactly like...
No, the quality's fine. The price was too cheap.
Exactly. I brought the broken O-ring with me, so I knew exactly what I needed. I knew, the material. But because it did not have the mill standard number part, NRN number...
Because it didn't cost a lot of money.
Marked on the thing, which is like a patent, and, like, hey, this is a real military, whatever, which is essentially just a tax stamp. I walked down there, and thankfully, looking back on this, I'm thankful that Chief was, or not Chief, my first class was down there. He's like, nope, we can't use those. And I asked why. I'm a firstborn. And he gave me a great reason. If this pump blew and killed somebody, while we were underway, and there's an investigation, which of course would happen, and they found this part that was not a mill standard stamped supply ordered part. Somebody could not get their SGLI potentially, their life insurance. Somebody could go to prison. People could lose their jobs.
That's a great argument. Why did you buy that then?
Yeah, well, I didn't know. I mean, in my mind, I'm like, we need this part now. We need to fix this. I got to do this.
Okay.
This is fast. So the supply system was going to take a week. So we put it in the Navy supply, like, hey, we need this part. And he's like, it's going to take a week. And guess how much that one O-ring, so I got a package of like 5 or 10 for a few bucks. Guess how much that one O-ring was?
$8.
It was going to take a week to get here. $27 for one O-ring.
For like shipping and everything.
It was in the warehouse. It was already there. $27 for an O-ring.
Yeah.
That was the exact same O-ring I got for a few bucks for 5 of them because it didn't have that number on it. Because to your point, when the number crunchers come back at the end of the fiscal year and say, shoot, we are $100,000 short. We are $200,000. We're $1 million short. Where can we make this up? Oh, let's just increase the price across the board for all these O-rings and all of these hammers and all of these gold toilet seats and whatever. And look, hey, we met our budget, $1 million. And so kudos to the manufacturers who are getting paid boatloads for making the same product and selling one to the hardware store in Japan and one to the military for 10 times as much.
Yeah, and it's not some government organization.
It is the government.
Excuse me, that's selling those O-rings. No, it's just some dude.
Right, it's you in your basement that just has one mark with that stamp and the other one doesn't.
I know, hey, the government
exactly
needs this.
Yeah. Oh, there's a whole episode we could do on government contracting and jobs. But in defense, I wouldn't have it any other way from a form of government, capitalist government, which incentivizes. I mean, the whole point to bring this full circle, the whole point of this is we created this problem. We said, okay, government, we've got in our treasury that we just collected from all of the U.S. citizens, we've got this amount of money. How much are you asking for, Tim? Oh, I'm the head of defense. I'm asking for this amount. Great. You got it. Okay, next year, how much are you asking for again? Oh, you didn't need that much? Oh, then you get less. Oh, you needed more? Great, we'll give you more. So we've created this capitalistic drive. It's our fault for incentivizing it the wrong way. However, I wouldn't live in any other form of government currently that exists
more spending's always better
in the world.
And
because
I'd rather be in debt. Yeah. To our point.
We've talked about this before on the episode. We've talked about this, Steve and I, in the hot tub. If you've got to fall in one of these two buckets, one is an economy where you are debt free, and you can think of countries around the world where people live debt free, but they are dirt poor. Their quality of life is incredibly low, but they're debt free.
They can't ever get a credit card, which is debt.
Right. They can't get a car.
Which means they can't ever get a car payment unless
Everything
they have
that they
the
do,
$30,000.
right.
To pay
Everything
it
they
for
do
it
has to be from savings or a trade. There's nothing that they can do to borrow money to increase their quality of life.
Same as cash saying or something like,
Yeah.
It's 90 days, same as cash or something.
Right. They can't ever do that. But if you want to be, there's that group of people, or there's the group of people that are in copious amounts of debt.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at you, America. But your quality of life is far better.
I have a house I haven't paid off.
Our prisoners have a gym membership and HBO.
Yeah, exactly.
If our prisoners have a better quality of life than free people in another country, that tells you something. But we all are in copious amounts of debt. So there's the trade-off, right? So
I wish I could go when I file my taxes every year and say, I used it all and I need more.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, you owe us this much. You know what? Actually, I've got one better for you. I used it all, and I'm going to need more next year.
Exactly.
Really? That's the kind of citizen we're looking for.
Yeah. Start printing now.
Yeah. Well, the only way government makes money is through its citizens, so they have to tax us.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. If you have a printing press at home, email us. We would love to receive your dollars. Or, your debt.
Actually, to that, Steven's looking to lend money out in exchange for $2 a day. So if you're looking to borrow money and you're willing to accept a low interest payment of a mere $2 a day until it's paid off,
it's not very low.
Contact Steve. Sizzly Steve.
Thank you for your time and consideration. This is not, what do you have to say those terms? When you're a lender, you got to
We are not authorized financial consultants.
No MLS number.
Yeah, this has been another wonderful episode on the Anavivo podcast. Thank you, Steve, for joining me again today. And I guess the big takeaway for our listeners here, again, to not leave you in a downward spiral of how awful the system can be. The joy here is that if you're listening and you're listening in America, you are doing better than most people around the world, even if you are also in copious amounts of debt.
Well,
so
we think so.
Yeah. Praise the Lord for that, and look for the little things around your life to give thanks for today and on your way. And don't forget to fill out that poll. Where are you listening to this podcast? Click on that or visit anavivo.com. And as my kids would say,
thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Anavivo podcast. We welcome your feedback and ideas. You can learn more about us by simply Googling the word Anavivo. This podcast is supported by listeners like you. I am a licensed real estate broker with Compass Real Estate and a nationwide real estate matchmaker. We consult with you for free, find and vet the right real estate professional that specializes in the area and niche you need, are paid by that professional, and they get clients like yourself who want and need their unique specialty or winning track record. If you or someone you know is in the market to buy or sell real estate anywhere in the U.S., don't simply web search the highest paying advertiser. Let us use our licensed experience to find and vet the real and best professional for you. It costs you nothing but a phone call or email with me, and has saved my clients financially and emotionally. I'd be honored to serve, and you can reach me direct by email at tim.c.miller@outlook.com. And as always, To God be the glory.